Stephen Miller stared at the transmission screen, his jaw slack with disbelief. The words substantial inheritance and married within 30 days burned into his retinas, a bizarre ultimatum from beyond the grave. His estranged uncle, a man he'd barely known, had left him a fortune, with one hell of a string attached. The 32-year-old botanist ran a hand through his unkempt hair, his mind racing. 30 days. It was absurd. He glanced out the viewport of the International Space Station, Earth a blue marble suspended in the void. Who could he possibly marry up here? As if on cue, his comm unit chirped, "Miller, report to the command module immediately." Minutes later, Stephen found himself facing a grim-faced panel of station administrators and what appeared to be a potted plant. No, he realized with a start, it was alive, sentient, alien. "Meet Cygnus," the station commander said, gesturing to the entity. "She's a Rizian diplomat." Stephen's scientific curiosity warred with his instinctive revulsion. Cygnus's body was a trunk-like structure covered in rough, bark-like skin. Leafy appendages sprouted from various points, and what he assumed were eyes peered at him from within a cluster of vibrant petals. Most disconcerting were the pollen-producing stigmas that occasionally released small puffs of golden dust. "The Rizians have proposed an interspecies marriage to strengthen our newfound alliance," the commander continued. "Given your unique financial situation, you've been selected as the ideal candidate." Stephen's mouth went dry. "You want me to marry her?" The implications hit him like a meteor. The inheritance, his research, the future of human-Rizian relations, all hanging in the balance. "Think of the scientific opportunities, Miller," urged the station's lead researcher. "The resources we could secure for Earth, the advancements in xenobotany alone." "I'll do it," Stephen interrupted, surprising even himself. The next few days passed in a blur. A makeshift ceremonial chamber was prepared in one of the station's larger modules. Stephen found himself standing before a small gathering of humans and Rizians, Cygnus beside him. As they exchanged vows, hers a melodic series of rustles and pollen releases, Stephen noticed something extraordinary. Cygnus's leaves were shifting hue, from a deep green to a soft, iridescent blue. A sweet, almost intoxicating scent filled the air. The ceremony concluded and Stephen's comm unit pinged. The inheritance had cleared. He was now wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, his research funded for decades to come. But as he turned to his new alien bride, another message flashed across his screen. "Congratulations on your union," it read. "The Rizian High Council looks forward to welcoming you, both as ambassadors to our homeworld." Stephen felt the floor drop out from under him. Leave Earth? Abandon his life's work? Live on an alien world with a wife he could barely look at without wincing? As if sensing his distress, Cygnus extended a leafy appendage, gently brushing his arm. The touch sent an unexpected shiver through him, not entirely unpleasant. Beyond the viewport, Stephen could see a flurry of activity as human and Rizian officials argued animatedly. Some gesticulated wildly, faces red with passion or anger. Others stood rigid, their expressions a mix of hope and fear. He'd done this. His decision, his marriage, had sparked a firestorm of debate, a step towards peace or a betrayal of humanity's genetic future. Stephen looked at Cygnus, really looked at her for the first time. In her alien features, he saw not disgust but possibility, mystery, discovery. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Life was about to get very, very interesting. Stephen's gaze lingered on Cygnus, his alien bride, as the airlock hissed shut behind them. The Rizian transport ship hummed to life, its organic walls pulsing with an otherworldly energy. As they left the familiar confines of the International Space Station, Stephen felt a pang of regret. "Second thoughts?" Cygnus asked, her voice a melodic rustle of leaves. Stephen shook his head. "Just processing. It's a lot to take in." The journey to Rizia stretched before them, days of interstellar travel in close quarters. Stephen threw himself into his work, meticulously documenting Cygnus's biology. He cataloged the texture of her bark-like skin, the arrangement of her leafy appendages, the chemical composition of her pollen. But as the days passed, Stephen noticed subtle changes in Cygnus. Her rough exterior began to smooth, taking on a polished sheen. Her leaves grew more graceful, their edges softening into elegant curves. At first, he attributed it to the ship's artificial environment, but then he caught Cygnus poring over human cultural databases. "What are you doing?" he asked, peering over her shoulder at a screen filled with earth fashion and art. Cygnus's petals fluttered, releasing a sweet scent. "Learning. Adapting. Isn't that what a good partner does?" The question caught Stephen off guard. He'd been so focused on maintaining professional distance, he'd almost forgotten the reality of their situation. This wasn't just a scientific expedition. It was a marriage. As they approached Risia, Stephen's anxiety mounted. The planet loomed in the view screen, a swirling mass of greens and purples, unlike anything he'd seen before. Massive plant structures dominated the landscape, twisting skyward in impossible geometries. The ship touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering sentient trees. As the airlock opened, Stephen was hit by a wall of humid, pollen-laden air. He coughed, his eyes watering. "You'll adjust," Cygnus assured him, extending a leafy appendage to steady him. A delegation of Risians awaited them, led by an imposing figure with a trunk-like body and a crown of vibrant, multi-hued flowers. "Welcome to Risia," the being intoned. "I am High Counselor Arborus." Arborus's gaze fixed on Stephen. "You have chosen a difficult path, human. To truly thrive here, you must change. Are you prepared for that?" Before Stephen could respond, a sharp pain lanced through his body. He doubled over, gasping. "The adaptation process has begun," Arborus stated matter-of-factly. "Cygnus will guide you through it." The next few days were a blur of agony and disorientation. Stephen's skin itched and burned as chlorophyll was integrated into his cells. His senses sharpened painfully, overwhelmed by the riot of colors and scents that permeated Risia. Through it all, Cygnus remained a constant presence. Her touch soothed his fevered skin, her pollen acting as a natural analgesic. In quiet moments between bouts of pain, she told him stories of Risian history and culture. As Stephen's body changed, so did his perception of Cygnus. He found himself noticing the graceful arc of her stem, the subtle iridescence of her petals. The alien revulsion he'd initially felt gave way to fascination, then to something deeper. But not everyone shared their growing connection. Dr. Marcus Stern, a human scientist, cornered Stephen after a particularly grueling adaptation session. "This is madness, Miller," Stern hissed. "You're throwing away millions of years of human evolution. For what? Some plants with delusions of grandeur?" Before Stephen could retort, a Risian official named Counselor Thorne interrupted. "Dr. Stern speaks out of turn, but he is not entirely wrong. This experiment threatens the purity of both our species." Stephen opened his mouth to argue, but a distant rumble cut him off. The ground beneath their feet trembled. "Storm's coming," Cygnus said, her leaves quivering. "A big one." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the living city. Panic erupted as both humans and Risians scrambled for shelter. Stephen felt a strange tingling in his newly chlorophyll-infused skin. He could sense the approaching tempest, feel the trees growing unease. "I can help," he realized aloud. "Cygnus, I need your help to coordinate with the city's root system." Together, they reached out to the sentient plants that formed Risia's infrastructure. Stephen's human intuition, combined with his newfound connection to the flora, allowed them to predict the storm's path with uncanny accuracy. For hours, they worked tirelessly, guiding both species to safety as wind and rain lashed the city. When it was over, Stephen found himself hailed as a hero by many. But the victory was bittersweet. He could see the suspicion in Dr. Stern's eyes, the barely concealed contempt from Counselor Thorne. As Stephen and Cygnus retreated to their quarters, exhausted but alive, a message flashed across their communication terminal. Stephen's heart raced as he recognized the sender. Dr. Laura Crawford, his ex-girlfriend from Earth. "I'm en route to Risia," the message read. "We need to talk about your condition." Stephen glanced at Cygnus, her alien features now a source of comfort rather than discomfort. He thought of the storm, of the lives they'd saved together, of the changes he'd undergone, not just physically, but emotionally. "What is it?" Cygnus asked, sensing his unease. Stephen took a deep breath. "I think our marriage just got a lot more complicated." Stephen stared at the message from Laura, his pupils dilating. The past and present collided, threatening to unravel everything he'd built on Rhesia. He turned to Cygnus, her iridescent petals pulsing with concern. "My ex-girlfriend is coming here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Cygnus's leaves rustled softly. "I see. And this troubles you?" Before Stephen could respond, alarms blared throughout the living city. The sound reverberated through his chlorophyll-infused skin, sending shivers down his spine. Cygnus's leaves quivered in response. "Emergency council meeting," she translated. "We must go." They rushed to the Grand Arbor, Rhezia's seat of government. The massive tree structure pulsed with nervous energy as human and Rhezian officials filed inside. High Counselor Arborist towered at the center, his flower crown a riot of agitated colors. "We've detected a Harvester scout ship entering the system," Arborist announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "Our worst fears have been realized." Panic rippled through the crowd. Stephen felt a surge of protective instinct, both for Cygnus and for this world he now called home. He stepped forward, his skin tingling with an unfamiliar sensation. "What can we do to prepare?" he asked, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. All eyes turned to him. Dr. Stern, lurking at the edges of the gathering, sneered. "What can a half-breed abomination do against the Harvesters?" Counselor Thorne nodded in agreement, his thorny appendages jam-packed. "The human speaks truly. This experiment has weakened us all." Stephen opened his mouth to retort, but Cygnus beat him to it. Her voice was sharp, like the crack of a whip. "My husband's unique physiology may be our greatest asset. His adaptations could hold the key to our defense." A murmur of consideration swept through the assembled officials. Arborist nodded thoughtfully. "Bring your research to the Science Council immediately. We'll need every advantage we can get." As the meeting dispersed, Stephen felt a familiar presence. He turned to see Dr. Laura Crawford striding towards him, her face a mask of professional concern. She'd barely changed since their days together on Earth, and for a moment Stephen felt a pang of nostalgia for his old life. "Stephen," Laura said, her voice soft, "we need to talk about your condition." He felt Cygnus stiffen beside him. "My condition is none of your concern, Dr. Crawford," Stephen replied, more coldly than he'd intended. Laura's eyes narrowed. "I'm here on a diplomatic mission, Stephen. Your transformation has serious implications for Earth-Rhezian relations, not to mention the ethical considerations." "Ethics," Cygnus interrupted, her leaves rustling angrily. "You speak of ethics while our worlds face extinction." The tension was palpable. Stephen felt torn between his past and present, his human heritage and his Rhezian future. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the entrance to the Grand Arbor. A group of Rhezians, led by Counselor Thorne, burst into the chamber. Their leaves were sharp, their bark-like skin darkened with what Stephen now recognized as aggression. "Death to the hybrid!" Thorne shouted. "Purify our species!" Everything happened in a blur. Stephen saw the glint of a weapon, heard Cygnus's warning cry. Without thinking, he thrust his hands forward. To his astonishment, the floor of the Grand Arbor erupted with thick, thorny vines. They formed a protective barrier around him and Cygnus, ensnaring their would-be assassins. The chamber fell silent, all eyes on Stephen. He stared at his hands in disbelief, then at the writhing mass of vegetation he'd somehow created. Cygnus touched his arm gently, her leaves soft against his bark-like skin. "How did you do that?" she whispered. Stephen shook his head, still in shock. I don't know. I just reacted." High Counselor Arborist approached, his massive form casting a shadow over the scene. "It seems," he said slowly, "that we have underestimated the potential of this union." As the security forces led away the subdued attackers, Arborist turned to Stephen and Cygnus. "We have a task for you both, one that may determine the fate of our worlds." Stephen met Cygnus's gaze, seeing his own mix of fear and tenacity reflected in her alien features. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The lines between human and region, between past and future, were blurring. And as the shadow of the harvesters loomed ever closer, Stephen realized that this blurring might be their only hope for survival. He took Cygnus's leafy appendage in his hand, feeling the pulse of life they now shared. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady. "What do you need us to do?" Arborus's flower crown shifted to a deep, serious hue. "Infiltrate the extremist group. Find out what they know and who they're working with. We suspect there may be outside influences at play." Stephen's gaze flickered to Laura, who stood at the edge of the chamber, her face unreadable. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense that the true battle was only just beginning. As they left the Grand Arbor, Stephen noticed his feet sinking slightly into the soft earth with each step. He looked down to see small rootlets emerging from his soles, seeking purchase in the soil. Another change, another step away from his human past. Cygnus noticed his distress. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice a soothing rustle. Stephen nodded, forcing a smile. "Just adapting," he said. "Always adapting." Together, they stepped into the risen twilight, ready to fight for their shared future, whatever form it might take. Stephen and Cygnus moved swiftly through the twilight-shrouded landscape of Rhesia, their mission to infiltrate the Harvester scout ship weighing heavily on their minds. As they approached the clearing where their small craft awaited, Stephen felt the ground beneath his feet pulse with an unfamiliar energy. "Do you feel that?" he asked Cygnus, his newly heightened senses on high alert. Cygnus's leaves quivered in response. "Yes, the trees are uneasy. Something's coming." They boarded their ship and took off, breaking through Rhesia's atmosphere. The vastness of space stretched before them, but their attention was fixed on the looming shape of the Harvester scout ship in the distance. As they drew closer, Stephen's stomach knotted with a mix of anticipation and dread. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, caught in an invisible grip. "Energy field!" Cygnus cried out, her appendages frantically working the controls. "It's pulling us in!" Stephen gritted his teeth, his bark-like skin creaking under the strain. "Can we break free?" Before Cygnus could respond, a massive surge rocked their craft. Alarms blared as they spiraled out of control, hurtling towards the Harvester ship's metallic surface. In that moment of panic, Stephen felt a strange calm wash over him. He closed his eyes, reaching deep into his newfound connection with plant life. As the ship plummeted, he focused all his energy outward. The impact never came. Instead, they found themselves cushioned by a thick, fibrous mat that had erupted from Stephen's body, enveloping their craft in a protective cocoon. When the chaos subsided, Stephen opened his eyes to find Cygnus staring at him in awe. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Stephen shook his head, equally amazed. "I'm not sure. I just reacted." They emerged from their battered ship onto the surface of the Harvester vessel. Stephen's breath caught in his throat as he took in the nightmarish landscape. Metallic structures twisted and merged with organic matter, pulsing with a sickly, otherworldly light. The air was thin and acrid, burning his lungs with each breath. Cygnus touched his arm gently. "Stephen, your skin—" He looked down to see his chest rising and falling less frequently. Chlorophyll-infused cells were working overtime, drawing energy from the faint starlight. "I'm photosynthesizing," he realized aloud. "It's helping me breathe." They began to move cautiously across the undulating surface, searching for an entry point. Stephen's newly developed rootlets provided traction on the strange terrain, while Cygnus's natural adaptability allowed her to navigate with ease. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Stephen tensed, his senses on high alert. "Something's coming," he warned. From behind a twisted spire of metal and vine, a group of biomechanical entities emerged. Part machine, part plant, their eyeless faces turned towards the intruders with malevolent intent. "Harvester drones," Cygnus hissed, her leaves overflowing with defensive toxins. The drones attacked without warning, their limbs morphing into deadly weapons. Stephen reacted instinctively, reaching out with his mind to the plant matter embedded in the drones' bodies. To his surprise, he found he could influence their movements, causing them to stumble and collide with each other. Cygnus sprang into action, releasing a cloud of spores that disoriented several drones. Together they fought off the attack, their unique abilities proving a formidable defense against the Harvester technology. As the last drone fell, the surface beneath their feet began to shift. The entire landscape was coming alive, tendrils of metal and organic matter reaching for them with sinister purpose. "Run!" Stephen shouted, grabbing Cygnus's appendage. They raced across the changing terrain, Stephen using his abilities to create temporary safe passages through the writhing mass. Cygnus employed her natural defenses, secreting enzymes that dissolved the grasping tendrils. As they ran, Stephen's hand brushed against a pulsing node of organic circuitry. A jolt of information flooded his mind, fragmented images of the Harvester's plans, their weaknesses, their driving purpose. "Cygnus," he gasped, "I think I can connect with their systems. We might be able to find a way to stop them." They pressed on, fighting against the ever-changing landscape of the Harvester ship. With each step, Stephen felt his humanity slipping away, replaced by something new, something powerful. Yet as he glanced at Cygnus, saw the perseverance in her alien features, he knew that whatever he was becoming, he wasn't facing it alone. Little did they know that back on Risia, events were unfolding that would complicate their mission even further. Dr. Laura Crawford, her true allegiance to the Terran Purity Front hidden from all, was setting in motion a plan that would bring the full might of the Harvester ship down upon the unsuspecting planet. As Stephen and Cygnus delved deeper into the heart of the alien vessel, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The true test of their unique bond and the power of their hybrid nature was only just beginning. The true test of their unique bond and the power of their hybrid nature was only just starting to unfold. As Stephen and Cygnus penetrated deeper into the Harvester ship, their forms began to blur and merge. The process was gradual at first, a tendril here, a shared thought there, but soon became impossible to ignore. Their minds intertwined, thoughts and memories flowing freely between them. Their bodies, once distinct, now fused into a single entity that was neither fully human nor entirely Risian. The newly formed Stephen-Cygnus hybrid moved with fluid grace through the ship's twisting corridors. Their enhanced senses picked up on minute vibrations and energy fluctuations, guiding them towards the central intelligence core. As they approached the core, Stephen-Cygnus placed a hand on the pulsing wall. Information flooded their shared consciousness, fragmented data streams, and corrupted code. They began to understand the true nature of the Harvesters. They were meant to preserve life, Stephen's voice echoed in their shared mind. But something went wrong. Cygnus's thoughts completed the realization. Their hybrid form extended tendrils into the ship's systems, interfacing directly with the alien technology. They began the delicate process of rewriting the Harvester's base code, attempting to restore their original purpose. The strain on their merged form was immense. Metallic patterns spread across their skin, intertwining with leafy veins. Circuitry pulsed beneath the surface, merging organic and mechanical in ways never before seen. Outside the ship, chaos reigned. The joint human-Risian fleet, led by High Counselor Arborus, engaged the Harvester vessel in a desperate battle. Energy beams lanced through space, explosions blossoming in silent bursts of light and debris. Inside, Stephen-Cygnus worked feverishly to reprogram the ship's core. Every alteration sent shockwaves through their system. They grit their teeth against the pain, pushing forward. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. The hybrid entity's eyes widened as they processed the incoming data. The weapons fire, it's damaging critical systems, they realized aloud, their voice a strange blend of human and Risian tones. They redoubled their efforts, knowing time was running short. As they delved deeper into the code, the ship's systems began to malfunction. Lights flickered, gravity shifted unpredictably. The vessel seemed torn between its original preservation protocols and its corrupted directives. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Stephen-Cygnus made a fateful decision. They extended their hybrid biology throughout the entire ship, merging with its very essence. The process was excruciating. Their consciousness stretched to its limits as it spread across the vast vessel. With this deep connection, they managed to halt the ship's advance towards Rizia. But the effort left them vulnerable, their awareness fragmented across countless systems. As they struggled to maintain control, a new threat emerged. Their heightened senses detected a small craft docking with the Harvester ship. Through the vessel's internal sensors, they watched Dr. Laura Crawford fight her way through the changing corridors. "She's heading for the central control room," Stephen Cygnus realized with growing alarm. They knew they had to confront Crawford directly to complete the reprogramming and save both Earth and Rizia. But their merged form was now inextricably linked to the ship's systems. With unyielding commitment, Stephen Cygnus began the agonizing process of separating part of their consciousness. They focused their will, forcing a portion of their hybrid form to coalesce into a mobile entity. The separation was like tearing their very being in two. Every fiber of their existence screamed in protest. But slowly, painfully, a new form took shape. A warrior born of human, Rizian, and Harvester elements. As this new entity solidified, the part of Stephen Cygnus merged with the ship continued its work on the core programming. The hybrid warrior flexed its new limbs, marveling at the perfect blend of organic and mechanical components. Alarms echoed through the ship as the space battle outside reached its crescendo. The hybrid warrior set off towards the central control room, ready to confront Dr. Crawford and defend the future of two worlds. As they moved, they felt the constant pull of their other half, still merged with the ship. The division of their consciousness was a constant strain, threatening to tear them apart at any moment. But they pressed on, knowing that failure was not an option. The hybrid warrior rounded a corner and came face to face with Dr. Crawford. Her eyes widened in shock and disgust at the sight of the being before her, a creature that defied all her notions of human purity. "What have you become?" Crawford spat, raising a weapon cobbled together from Harvester technology. The hybrid warrior stood tall, their voice a harmony of human tenacity and Rizian resilience. "We've become the bridge between worlds," they replied, "the key to saving both our species." As Crawford's finger tightened on the trigger, the hybrid warrior prepared for the fight of their life, a battle not just for survival, but for the very future of human-Rizian relations and the redemption of the Harvesters themselves. The hybrid warrior stood tall, their form a perfect fusion of human resilience and Rizian adaptability. Dr. Crawford's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and revulsion twisting her features as she beheld the creature before her. "What have you become?" she spat, raising a weapon cobbled together from Harvester technology. The hybrid's voice resonated with the harmonious blend of Stephen and Cygnus. "We've become the bridge between worlds," they replied, "the key to saving both our species." Crawford's finger tightened on the trigger, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts. The hybrid warrior dodged with inhuman speed, their movements fluid and precise. They reached out with their mind, manipulating the organic components of the ship to create barriers and obstacles. The central chamber became a shifting battlefield. Walls pulsed and writhed, floors rippled like liquid metal. Crawford's tactical training served her well as she vaulted over sudden protrusions and slid under closing apertures. The hybrid pursued relentlessly, their enhanced senses allowing them to predict the ship's transformations. Outside, the space battle raged. High Counselor Arborus's voice crackled over the comm systems of the human Rizian fleet. "Conventional weapons are ineffective. Prepare for emergency maneuver Alpha 7. A collective gasp went through the bridge crews as they realized the implications. Several ships broke formation, accelerating towards the massive Harvester vessel. The impact sent shockwaves through space, tearing massive breaches in the alien ship's hull. Inside, alarms blared as entire sections began to decompress. The part of Stephen Cygnus merged with the ship's systems detected the intrusion of boarding parties. It diverted resources, guiding these potential allies towards the central chamber. This split focus, however, came at a cost. The reprogramming process slowed, and the ship's trajectory wavered, once again turning towards Rizia. In the central chamber, Crawford found herself on the defensive. The hybrid warrior's superior abilities were overwhelming her defenses. Just as the creature closed in for the final strike, a cold smile crossed Crawford's face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, innocuous-looking device. "You may be evolved," she snarled, "but I came prepared." She activated the device, releasing a sickly green mist into the air. The effect on the hybrid warrior was immediate and horrifying. Their skin began to bubble and slough off, the perfect fusion of human and Rizian biology breaking down at the molecular level. The hybrid retreated, their body racked with pain. Through their shared consciousness, they communicated with the ship-bound portion of themselves. Emergency protocols activated, sealing off sections of the ship to contain the biological weapon. But this action trapped many of the boarding parties, leaving them vulnerable to both the pathogen and the ship's automated defenses. In an audacious attempt, the hybrid warrior reintegrated with their other half. The merger sent a shockwave of agony through their shared being, but it also accelerated the reprogramming process. As their consciousness expanded throughout the ship, they realized the terrible price of victory. The Steven Cygnus entity made its choice. They began the process of fully integrating with the ship's core systems, becoming one with the vessel itself. As their individual identities dissolved into the greater whole, the ship underwent a metamorphosis. Organic and mechanical components merged in new and impossible ways, creating a hybrid lifeform on a massive scale. The ship's trajectory suddenly changed, veering away from Rizia and accelerating towards the system's sun. Inside, chaos reigned. Crawford found herself trapped, forced to seek shelter from the spreading biological weapon she had unleashed. The boarding parties, scattered throughout the vessel, fought for survival as the ship's internal structure shifted around them. High Counselor Arborus watched in stunned silence as the Harvester's ship hurtled towards the sun. "Hold your fire," he commanded. "Something's happening. We need to understand what's going on before we act." As the ship plunged towards the star, the Steven Cygnus entity pushed itself to its limits. They raced against time, fighting to complete the reprogramming before the heat and radiation tore the vessel apart. Every system, every molecule of the ship became an extension of their shared consciousness. In the central chamber, Crawford stumbled through the shifting landscape. The biological weapon she had unleashed swirled around her, held at bay only by a quickly failing protective suit. She caught glimpses of trapped human and Rizian soldiers, their faces etched with fear and confusion. A voice echoed through the ship, a strange blend of Steven, Cygnus, and something altogether alien. "We are becoming something new," it intoned, "the preservation of life, as the harvesters were meant to be. But the cost..." The ship shuddered as it entered the sun's corona. Bulkheads groaned, hull plating began to melt. Inside, the trapped survivors huddled together, species differences forgotten in the face of annihilation. As temperatures rose to impossible levels, the Steven Cygnus entity felt their reprogramming near completion. But would it be enough? Could they rewrite the very nature of the harvesters in time to save not just themselves, but two entire worlds? The ship plunged deeper into the sun's fiery embrace, carrying within it the fate of humanity, the Rizians, and the corrupted harvesters. In these final moments, the true test of evolution, adaptation, and the power of unity would be decided in the heart of a star. In that instant, something extraordinary happened. The ship's hull began to transform, sprouting enormous leaf-like structures that unfurled into massive solar panels. The metallic surface rippled and shifted, taking on an organic quality that defied conventional physics. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. Captain Jack Harrison, leader of the human boarding party, stared in disbelief as the corridor around him pulsed with life. Walls that had once been cold steel now resembled living tissue, crisscrossed with glowing veins of energy. He tapped his communicator, struggling to keep his voice steady. "All teams, report in. What's happening on your ends?" Static crackled, then a chorus of confused voices responded. Each team described similar phenomena. The ship was changing, becoming something entirely new. "Sir," one of his lieutenants called out, "the biological weapon, it's spreading!" Harrison's eyes widened as he saw tendrils of sickly green mist seeping through a nearby vent. He quickly sealed his helmet, barking orders to his team. "Seal all gaps in your suits. We need to find a way to contain this stuff." As they retreated from the contaminated area, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was guiding them. Doors opened and closed seemingly of their own accord, herding the boarding party away from danger and towards the ship's center. Meanwhile, in a sealed chamber near the ship's core, Dr. Laura Crawford worked feverishly at a secondary control node. Her fingers flew over alien keyboards, her face a mask of drive and sweat. "I won't let you win," she muttered, eyes darting between multiple screens. "Whatever you've become, whatever you're trying to do, I'll stop it." Her actions sent shockwaves through the ship's systems. Entire sections reconfigured themselves, nearly crushing Harrison's team as they navigated the ever-changing labyrinth. At the heart of it all, the merged Stephen Cygnus entity struggled to maintain control. Their consciousness, now irrevocably intertwined with the ship's core, stretched to encompass every circuit and cell of the massive vessel. They felt Crawford's interference like a persistent itch, a corruption they needed to root out. With their expanded awareness, they also sensed the boarding parties scattered throughout the ship. They recognized Harrison's team as potential allies and began to subtly guide them, using the ship's transformed structure to lead them towards the central chamber. As the ship plunged deeper into the sun's embrace, its new solar panels began to absorb staggering amounts of energy. Power surged through the vessel's hybrid systems, accelerating the reprogramming process, but also creating dangerous instabilities. Stephen Cygnus channeled this power, pushing themselves to complete their task before the ship was torn apart. In that moment, they became aware of a terrifying development. The biological weapon was mutating, adapting to the intense radiation and spreading faster than ever. Harrison and his team felt the ship lurch as it entered the sun's corona. The temperature rose dramatically, their suit cooling systems struggling to compensate. Through gaps in the ship's structure, they caught glimpses of the fiery inferno outside. "How is this thing still holding together?" one of Harrison's soldiers asked, voice filled with awe and terror. "I don't know," Harrison replied, "but we need to keep moving. Something's guiding us, and I think we're getting close to answers." As they pressed on, they encountered pockets of the mutated biological weapon. The sickly green mist had taken on a faintly bioluminescent quality, its tendrils reaching out as if alive. They sealed off contaminated areas where they could, but the pathogen's rapid evolution made containment increasingly difficult. In orbit around Rizia, High Counselor Arboris watched the events unfold with growing alarm. The sensors on his flagship detected massive energy spikes from the harvester vessel, far beyond anything they'd encountered before. "By the ancient forest," he whispered, his leafy skin rustling with anxiety. "What have they unleashed?" He turned to his communications officer, his voice grave. "Send word to Risia. Begin evacuating the major cities. If that ship becomes a weapon—" He left the thought unfinished, his gaze fixed on the distant sun and the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. Back on the ship, Harrison's team finally reached the central chamber. The massive door irised open, revealing a scene that defied description. The chamber had become a surreal blend of organic and mechanical components, pulsing with energy. At its center, they saw the merged form of Stephen and Cygnus, their bodies a swirling mass of human, Rizian, and harvester elements. Dr. Crawford spun to face them, her eyes wild with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Stay back!" she shouted, brandishing a makeshift weapon cobbled together from ship components. "I won't let you stop me!" Harrison raised his hands, trying to project calm. "Doctor, stand down. Whatever you're trying to do, it's too late. Look around you. The ship, it's—" His words were cut off as the vessel shuddered violently. They had reached the deepest point of their solar plunge. The chamber filled with blinding light as Stephen Cygnus channeled the sun's incredible power. In that moment, everything changed. The light engulfed them all, Harrison's team, Dr. Crawford, and the hybrid entity at the chamber's heart. When it faded, they found themselves in a transformed environment. The harsh lines and cold metal of the ship's interior had given way to a lush, garden-like landscape. The air was fresh and clean, filled with the scent of growing things. Harrison removed his helmet, marveling at the change. The biological weapon that had threatened them was gone, transmuted into benign plant life that twined around the chamber's new organic structures. Dr. Crawford stared in shock, her body partially merged with a nearby wall. The hand that had held her weapon was now fused with a flowering vine, its blossoms pulsing in time with her heartbeat. At the center of it all, Stephen and Cygnus materialized as separate entities once more. Their bodies bore the marks of their ordeal. Stephen's skin shimmered with metallic patterns, while Cygnus's leafy skin now incorporated circuit-like structures. They stood hand in hand, their eyes reflecting the enormity of what they had accomplished. "Captain Harrison," Stephen said, his voice carrying echoes of the ship's new nature, "we have much to explain." As the transformed Harvester ship emerged from the sun's corona, its new mission just beginning, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The consequences of Stephen and Cygnus's incredible transformation were yet to be fully understood. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As the transformed Harvester ship emerged from the sun's corona, its new mission just beginning, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The consequences of Stephen and Cygnus's incredible transformation were yet to be fully understood. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The ship's massive leaf-like solar panels unfurled, casting a verdant glow across the void of space. As they approached Rizia's orbit, the vessel's presence sent waves of awe and trepidation through both human and Rizian populations. High Counselor Arborus stood on the bridge of his flagship, his leafy skin rustling with a mixture of anticipation and concern. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Earth's United Nations Secretary-General. "High Counselor," the Secretary-General said, her voice tight with tension, "we've detected the approaching vessel. Our analysis confirms it's the transformed Harvester ship. What's your assessment of the situation?" Arborus took a deep breath, his photosynthetic cells working overtime to process the gravity of the moment. "We're dealing with something entirely new," he replied. "I propose we allow them to dock at our main spaceport. We need answers, and confrontation may prove disastrous." After a moment of hesitation, the Secretary-General nodded. "Agreed. We'll coordinate our response teams. Good luck, High Counselor." As the communication ended, Arborus turned to his crew. "Prepare for docking procedures. Alert all security teams, but emphasize non-aggressive protocols. We're making history today, for better or worse." The transformed Harvester ship, now a harmonious blend of organic and mechanical components, gracefully maneuvered into Rizia's main spaceport. As it settled into the docking clamps, a hush fell over the assembled crowd of humans and Rizians. With a soft hiss, a portal in the ship's side dilated open. Stephen and Cygnus stepped out, their bodies a testament to the extraordinary changes they had undergone. Stephen's skin shimmered with metallic patterns that pulsed with an inner light, while Cygnus's leafy form now incorporated intricate circuit-like structures. As they walked down the gangway, plant life sprouted in their wake. Delicate flowers and sturdy vines erupted from the metal decking, twining around support struts and reaching towards the sky. The assembled crowd gasped, some backing away in fear while others leaned in with fascination. Among the onlookers, Stephen spotted familiar faces, his former colleagues from the International Space Station. Dr. Emily Chen, her eyes wide with disbelief, stepped forward. "Stephen," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "is it really you?" Stephen smiled, the expression transforming his hybrid features into something achingly human. "It's me, Emily. We have so much to tell you." High Counselor Arborus approached, flanked by a contingent of Rizian officials and human diplomats. He raised his hands in a traditional Rizian greeting. "Welcome back to Rizia," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent spaceport. "I believe we have much to discuss." Cygnus nodded, her voice a melodious blend of Rizian tones and something altogether new. "Indeed, High Counselor, we bring news that will change everything." Within hours, Stephen and Cygnus found themselves addressing a global broadcast, their images transmitted to every corner of Earth and Rizia. The backdrop was a hastily prepared conference room, its walls adorned with a mixture of human and Rizian symbols of unity. "People of Earth and Rizia," Stephen began, his voice resonating with newfound confidence, "we stand before you as living proof of what our species can achieve together. The threat of the Harvesters has been transformed into an opportunity for growth and renewal. Cygnus continued, her leafy appendages gesturing expressively. We've reprogrammed the harvester ship, giving it a new purpose. No longer will it destroy worlds. Instead, it will breathe life into barren planets and protect endangered ecosystems across the galaxy. Stephen nodded, his metallic skin catching the light. To that end, we're announcing the formation of the Galactic Life Preservation Initiative, GLPI. This organization will use our reprogrammed harvester technology to restore and protect life throughout the cosmos. As they spoke, images flashed on screens behind them. Projections of dead worlds transformed into verdant paradises, endangered species flourishing in newly created habitats, and the vastness of space dotted with the green glow of life-bearing planets. The announcement sent shockwaves through both worlds. Government officials huddled in emergency sessions. Scientists pored over the data being transmitted from the transformed ship, and citizens took to the streets, some in celebration, others in protest. In a secure medical facility on Rizia, a team of human and Rizian doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Dr. Laura Crawford. Her body, partially merged with the ship's systems, presented a unique challenge and opportunity. As they worked to separate her from the mechanical components, they made groundbreaking discoveries about the integration of organic and cybernetic systems. Weeks passed, and Stephen and Cygnus wasted no time in demonstrating the potential of the GLPI. They led a mission to a barren moon in the Rizian system, their ship hovering over its lifeless surface. With a synchronized gesture, they channeled energy through their hybrid bodies and into the ship's systems. The assembled dignitaries watched in awe as the moon's surface began to change. Atmosphere coalesced from seemingly nowhere. Water welled up from hidden reservoirs, and plant life erupted in a riot of colors. In a matter of hours, the dead rock was transformed into a lush, habitable world. As news of this success spread, skepticism began to give way to hope. Governments that had been hesitant now clamored to be part of the GLPI. Scientists from both worlds collaborated with renewed vigor, eager to unlock the secrets of the hybrid technologies. Amid the flurry of activity, Stephen received a message that brought him back to Earth, literally and figuratively. His uncle's lawyer had been trying to reach him, reminding him of the inheritance he had all but forgotten. As he stood in his uncle's old study, surrounded by botanical texts and specimens, Stephen was struck by an idea. "We'll use the funds to establish a research center," he announced to Cygnus, who stood beside him, her leafy form contrasting with the old-world charm of the room. "Right here on Earth, we'll bridge the gap between our old science and this new frontier we've discovered." Cygnus entwined her tendril-like fingers with Stephen's. "A perfect tribute to your uncle," she agreed, "and a way to ensure that Earth remains at the forefront of these advancements." As they left the study, Stephen caught his reflection in a mirror. The face that looked back at him was no longer fully human, but it was his, and beside him stood Cygnus, once considered ugly by human standards, now a being of extraordinary beauty and complexity. Their eyes met in the reflection, a shared understanding passing between them. They had evolved beyond what either of them could have imagined. Their reluctant marriage transformed into a partnership that was reshaping the galaxy. As they stepped out into the sunlight, the first shoots of a new era were already beginning to sprout around them, promising a future filled with untold possibilities.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.